This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, and welcome to Q&A, the show where I take your questions from YouTube and Twitter and answer them here in video format. A ton of great questions came in this week, so let's chat. First question comes in from Big Papa Chase, who says, how do you feel about the rest of the schedule, knowing who we play and what our defense has done? I think the thing of note to come with the rest of the schedule is that the defense is good. They are who we think they are, at least at home especially. They are who we think they are. Now, against some of the elite teams, we'll see how they pass those tests. But we also know that this offense has probably seen the worst quarterback play it's going to see all season. I think we have gone through some of the worst games that we're going to go through all season. So it tells you that, hey, your defense is good, and you know that your offense is going to be improving from where you started at 5-3. You also feel like the second half of this schedule is not as difficult as the first half of this schedule. So you feel pretty good about where this team is at for the rest of the year. Now, how high does the offense reach? We will see, but you feel good about it on some level because you know that the offense has only room to improve given how they started, right? I would be pretty surprised if they turned the ball over and more in the second half than they did in the first half, right? But hopefully that's not the case. Hopefully this Browns offense continues to grow, and we have seen the worst days of the offense behind us as we get through this whole Deshaun Watson injury situation. Mr. Camtastic says, is it weird? I think Moore is going to get going in this game versus Baltimore. I like to see a big shot to him early. You know, I think if there's somebody like between him and Cedric Tillman, I think one of those guys does have to have a pretty good game to beat Baltimore. I don't think you can beat Baltimore with Amari Cooper and Amari Cooper alone. Now, Marlon Humphrey did have a hamstring pop up during the week, so he might not play in that game, which might change things. But Brandon Stevens has been really good for that Baltimore team. They've had some guys just step up in that secondary, and they played really well. So I wouldn't count them out. But yeah, I think that somebody other than Amari Cooper is going to have to get going, because if the Browns want to win this game, they're going to have to play with a lot. They have to get a lot of chunk plays and be explosive on offense. They don't have to necessarily be super consistent offensively, but they do have to be explosive, kind of like the Cincinnati Bengals, who are one of the few teams who I think they lost to them, actually. Aaron Matthews says, how do you see the Browns' offensive roles with the tackle situation? Also, do you have a bold prediction for the game? I think the Browns are going to hold up fine at tackle. That's my bold prediction, even though the fact they're going in with Garyon Conley and James Hudson at right tackle. The reason I think they're going to be fine is the edges just aren't where Baltimore tries to overwhelm you. They try to overwhelm you in the middle. They try to overwhelm you mentally. You can get away with not having the greatest tackles in the world this week because there's nobody who's going to individually make you pay for that, right? Like Jadeveon, we know what he's been in situations like this. We've had him on the team where we're like, oh, they got a backup tackle going against him, and we should dominate. And then we saw what it was with Jadeveon, and nobody in that edge room's much better than Jadeveon Clowney. So, given what we've seen out of him, I understand it's not an optimal situation, but I also think that the matchup is favorable enough for the Browns that they should be able to hold up. And I trust in the ability of Bill Callahan to figure something out, because again, man, this ain't the first time we've gone into a big game without a tackle or without are starting tackles, right? They did this in 2020 against New York, came back around, did it again against Pittsburgh in the playoffs, came back around, did it again against Kansas City in the playoffs. They come one bad call away from winning that game and going to the AFC Championship game. So I think when it comes to this kind of situation, Bill Callahan and Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski and this Browns team has earned my benefit of the doubt that they will be able to figure out something that will be fine enough for this game, and that they're going to be able to get through it. If Kevin feels good about the plan, if Andrew feels good about the plan, if Bill feels good about the plan, then I feel good about the plan because they have done nothing to make me question if I should in this specific type of situation because I've seen them come through in these moments before. The next question says, Mim says Joe Bitonio at left tackle this week. I don't think so. If they would have brought in guys who they felt like were guards, like if Alex Leatherwood was the guy that they brought in off the practice squad, and that was getting the first team reps, then I think you'd have a point. But no, I don't think they're moving Joe to left tackle. And I don't think that idea makes much sense, to be honest. Like, I get it on the forefront. If you're not even like taking the context of the matchup in mind, you think to yourself, hey, Joe Bitonio's the best offensive lineman we have. He can play tackle. Let's put him at tackle because left tackle is the most important position most weeks on the offensive line. But that's not the situation this week. You need Joe Bitonio at guard this week because Justin Madubuike is one of the best sack artists in the NFL, and he plays 3-tech. You need Ethan Posick. You need Wyatt Teller. You need that core interior of the Cleveland Browns more than you've ever needed them this week. They need a big game, and you can't get a big game out of Joe if you have him out here playing tackle. Like, you just got to trust the process, trust that, hey, you could put somebody in at left tackle and then use the strength in the interior to kind of push you along. And again, that's why I trust Bill Callahan and this offensive staff and Andrew Berry to figure out something for this week because they figured out this stuff before. It's not the first time that they have scrambled together a solution, and I don't think it's one of those weeks where it makes sense to put Joe at left tackle. If this were reversed and you were playing Pittsburgh first, and DeJuan Jones was out, I might have to consider it. But since that's not the case and you playing the Ravens, I think it makes no sense to move Joe to left tackle this week. And just to get ahead of you, I don't think it makes very much sense to put him at left tackle next week because Cam Hayward's back. So, and honestly, Larry Ogunjobi was the issue when we played Pittsburgh last time. So you can't just act like the guard position does not matter. And it's not like our backups at guard are much better than our backups at tackle. So, when that's the case, you just got to go with your backups, right? It doesn't make sense to kind of try to finagle it and put Joel somewhere he doesn't belong. RB Betting says, Q, what do you need to see out the Browns this Sunday for a win? Explosive plays. I would say I think they need to be explosive. I think they need to get multiple 20, 30-yard plays downfield. Again, I can understand if they're not going to be the most consistent offense, but if they can be explosive and put up 20, 24 points, then I am absolutely happy with that kind of an effort. This is not a week where I'm expecting them to put up 30 points. This is not a week where I'm expecting Deshaun Watson to have a 3-touchdown, no interception day. Like, I'm expecting he's probably going to throw an interception in this game, but you hope that the Ravens will turn the ball over as well because they turn the ball over almost every week as well, just like the Browns. So, it's going to be a muddy game. It's going to be an ugly game. I don't think the quarterback play is going to be very pretty on either side of the ball, and I think it's going to be a defensive battle this week. Thank you for the question. The next question comes from AJ, who says, which wide receiver breaking out in the second half of the season gives us a higher ceiling, Moore or Tillman? And what's the realistic chance that one or both actually does? I think you absolutely need one of them. I'm not saying have a breakout, but you need one of those guys to be contributing. And right now, you're just not getting a ton of contribution out of Elijah Moore, and you're getting absolutely nothing out of that third wide receiver position, whether it was DPJ, now Cedric Tillman. So you absolutely need somebody else other than David Njoku and Amari Cooper to step up and be a factor in the receiving game. So, I don't know what the odds of that are, But I know that if you're the Browns, you need one of them to step up, and this week would be a good week for that to happen. So, who knows who it would be? Hey, if Deshaun gets comfortable, maybe that'll be the key to unlocking stuff with Elijah Moore. Oliver Kane says, "Hey Q, how would you rate Strong and Ford as a de facto number one running back? I know they have different strengths and abilities, but I find myself wanting to give Strong more carries per game. What do you think?" Now, I used to watch Pierre Strong when he was at South Dakota State, so I have a bit of familiarity with him. And I'm going to tell you this right here, right now. Pierre Strong's not a number one running back. I understand why people think that, because sometimes you'll watch Pierre Strong and you go, oh my God, he is so explosive. And he's a big guy, so you assume certain things about him. But Pierre Strong, in my opinion, just like Jerome Ford, just like Kareem Hunt, these are guys who are great with 10 carries, right? Like if they're splitting carries, they're fine. But when they become the feature back, there's an issue. I think it's no mistake that it wasn't until all three of them started splitting carries that you saw all three of them be productive. These are guys who need to be in a rotation. Why is that? I'll explain with every running back. For Pierre Strong, the reason he needs to split carries, one, he is awful at pass protection. Two, he has absolutely, positively zero contact balance. If you touch him at any point, he will stop and fall. It is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Like, you remember how good Dearness Johnson was with contact balance? Just imagine the exact opposite of him. Honestly, if you combined Pierre Strong's like explosive ability, size, and weight with Dearness Johnson's contact balance, you would have an elite running back. But he ain't got that. So he's really only good in spurts. If you ran him consistently, you would see what I'm talking about. But right now, the Browns give him like 5-7 carries, which is a good amount, which is the perfect amount. You don't want to put Pierre Strong out there long enough for you to notice that he's not really who you think he is. And I'm going to be honest with you, even when I watched him in South Dakota State in the FCS and the Missouri Valley Football Conference, they had the same understanding. The Jackrabbits didn't run him out there 30 plays a game, even though he was a NFL draft pick waiting to happen. They would put him in there to split carries. And he split carries with like a 3-man rotation, I think, at South Dakota State. So that's just who he is, and that's how you're going to get the most out of him. He's a good rotation running back, but he's not going to be your de facto running back number one. Jerome Ford's your most put together back. He's fine in pass at receiving, even though he does not have the strongest hands in the world. He's a decent route runner and pretty explosive with the ball in his hands. He doesn't have the greatest vision in the world, but I think a lot of people are comparing him to Nick Chubb, and I think that's a very, very, very unfair comparison. I think the Browns need to do a better job of protecting him by not running him in the same plays that you would run Nick Chubb, because all we can do is compare when they do that. And that's just not a fair comp for him, right? Nobody was looking at Jerome Ford as the next Nick Chubb. It'd be ridiculous. But I think he's fine for what he is. He's a young running back, so he's going to make some mistakes every once in a while, but you can see the potential there with him, and he's a good pass protector. So if you could put somebody in for the most amount of snaps, it's Jerome Ford, because he can pass protect, he can run routes, he can catch okay, and he can run the ball and be plenty explosive. As we've seen, he's had those 2 big runs so far this season. And then Kareem Hunt is Kareem Hunt. He doesn't really have that explosive ability to get those 20, 30-yard chunks anymore, but he's good for a 5-7-yard chunk. He's real consistent, short yardage guy. And that's really your rotation. And that's how I would try to use those guys. And that's where those guys are at their best. So if you got to run the ball 35 times, you would give 15 to Ford, 10 to Strong, and then 10 to Hunt. That's what the rotation really has to be. And I understand people's frustrations with Jerome Ford because he does not see it as cleanly as some other running backs, but the guy who gets the most carries isn't necessarily the guy who could do the one thing the best. It's the guy who can do all of the things good enough that you can keep him out there the most, and that happens to be Jerome Ford versus Kareem Hunt or anybody else, because what he has over Kareem Hunt, Kareem Hunt has better vision than him, but I think Jerome Ford much more explosive at this point in his career. Sean McTaggart says, is this a prove-it game for the Browns? And I don't know where this came from, but no, it's not a prove-it game. It would be a nice game if you can get it, but the season overall proves it. Not necessarily one game, right? And I think we got to get out this mindset of saying that this game's going to prove to us that the Browns are for real. We got to get out that mindset, because what proves to us that the Browns are for real is never one game. We said that shit about the Cincinnati game. We were like, hey, if the Browns come out here week 1 and win that Cincinnati game, that proves to us that they're for real. And then they did it, and then they lost against Pittsburgh the next week, and all of a sudden people thought the season was over. And they come back, they beat Tennessee, and then they come back, and then we play Baltimore, we lose. Now the season's over again. And then we go on the bye week, and what are people saying during the bye week? If this Browns team wants to prove that they're for real, they gotta beat San Francisco. And then we beat San Francisco, we beat Indianapolis, we lose to the Seahawks, and people are back on the season is over thing. The season proves it. You can win this game and lose versus Pittsburgh, and this game didn't prove nothing. All it proves is that you won that game. The season proves it. There's no prove it game. That's not a thing. The season proves it. Because what will prove that the Browns are for real? Their record. What will prove that the Browns, and then even when you get the record, let's say they get to 11-5 or 11-6 now, right? Because 17 games. Let's say they get to 11 wins or 12 wins, and you feel like they're for real. What are we going to say? Well, you know what's going to prove it? The playoffs. And they win a playoff game. Well, you know what's going to prove it? You beat the Chiefs. And then the season will prove it. If you want to prove this Browns team is for real, you got to wait for proof. There's no individual game that's going to tell you things going to be okay for the rest of the year. You got to go week by week. I say this every week. It's a week by week league. You're not going to watch one game and be like, we're good for the rest of the season. Not in the NFL. Not in the NFL. Because you can win this game, lose next week. Now where you at? Week to week league, man. No single game going to prove it until you clinch the playoffs, and then you only proved it for the regular season. Now you got to start proving it for the regular season. For the postseason. Ain't no such thing as a prove it game. This game only proves one thing, a win or a loss in week 10. That's the only thing it proves. It don't prove nothing about down the line. The Browns win this game. That don't guarantee that they're going to go undefeated for the rest of the year or even give them a better chance to go undefeated. It just proves that they won on Sunday. Now you got to get the next one. And then you get the next one. And then you get the next one, and then you get the next one. But that's what it is. I don't believe in prove it games. I don't believe in putting all the pressure on one game to prove a season when you play 17 games in the season. The season proves the season, not one game in the season. And we know this because we have done this multiple times where we declared something a prove it game. They won the game, and it ain't proved nothing to y'all apparently because we back on the season over train after they lost the next game. Y'all know what it is, man. It's a week-to-week league. DTR #1 fan says, do you think the Browns will stay playing a ton of man versus with how good Lamar has been playing against man lately? Keep up the great vids. I think they're going to try to get pressure. But I don't know how much man they're going to play. They'll be creative with it. I expect Jim Schwartz to be pretty creative with the defense this week. We'll see. A Churchy says, I would give Andrew Berry a rough 50-50 success rate on draft picks and trades. Do you agree or not? And how much does this compare to other NFL general managers? I don't think you can look at it like that, to be honest with you. Like, it's not about how many picks out of picks that you get right, because not every pick is built the same. If you hit on 3 guys who hit expectation in the 7th round, but you miss on all your first round picks, that's not going to feel right? Even though that's 50%. It's about what kind of players do you get at the end of the day? What players do you bring in with the situations that you've had? And Andrew Berry has not had top 50 picks, but he's gotten top 50 players out the draft classes the last 2 years. And I think that says everything about that team's ability to draft. That's what contemplates a successful draft. You can't just look at it and put the raw number out there and be like, well, 30 of his 28, 13 of his 28 picks have been in the league longer than 5 years. That doesn't really say anything. It's about how many players that you would feel like are in the top 50 of that draft class at the end of the day. When it's all said and done, were you able to get out that draft class? And if you can get 2 of those players in the draft, that draft's a success. If you can get 3, that draft's a super success. You get 4, that was a great draft. generational draft. So that's how it is. I think we put too much emphasis on every individual pick working out when we know the odds of it are far from that being the case. Like, honestly, a success rate of like 25% on draft picks is probably really good in the NFL, given how much a crapshoot it is to find good players. Gus McKay says, hey, Q, what's the expectation for Watson against the Ravens defense? Thanks. My expectation for Watson, I don't know if I have expectations for him. I have hopes for him, but until I see him play for like 3 games with this shoulder injury and it shows signs of healing, I can't sit here and have serious expectations of him. I just want him to do what he can to make sure that the Browns can stay in this game for 4 quarters. I want this to be a competitive game. What I don't want to be on here talking about is like bad, misthrown short interceptions or something like that. Like, he throws an interception down the field, I'm not really going to be tripping. But if he throws them in like the red zone, like then that becomes a problem. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we got to see how the game folds out. But I expect this team to be able to keep this game competitive and have a chance at some point to try to win. We'll see if you could do that, right? But that's what I guess my expectations would be. I don't know how many. I don't really feel good about putting stats and numbers on it, because the more I do this, the more I realize that that's just never really helpful. It's just kind of a thing you can point to. You know what I mean? It's not really a helpful piece in the conversation of how the game can flow out, in my opinion. But thank you for the question. Brian says, with the way Cooper is playing with Watson, do you think next year they find a way to bring him back? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think you got to at this point. He's been by far your most productive player and in the receiving room. And what are you going to be if you don't have Amari Cooper, unless you're willing to trade for somebody? So I think it makes no sense for them to get off of him at this point. But we'll see where we are at the end of the season. But that's it for today's Q&A. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Pete.